Hello and welcome back to An Old Man Watches, where today I'm going to be talking about the 1960 ghostly revenge movie Tormented. The protagonist of the film is the jazz pianist named Tom Stewart. Tom lives on an island in Cape Cod where he is preparing to marry his fiancée, an heiress whose wealth will secure Tom's financial future. But these idyllic plans for money making matrimony are about to run into trouble in the form of Tom's ex girlfriend, Vi. Vi knows Tom's dirty secrets and she's not afraid to use them to get what she wants. And the main thing she wants is for Tom to break off the engagement that would finally win him financial security. Tom and Vi end up arguing atop a lighthouse when the railing gives way and Vi starts to fall. She catches the edge but lacks the strength to climb back to safety. Unsurprisingly, she pleads for Tom to help her, but he does not. Now, he doesn't stamp on her fingers or take any actions to make Vi fall. Let's be clear about that. But Tom consciously and deliberately withdraws his hand rather than reaching out to aid her, and he is thus culpable in her fate, which is to plunge into the void below. Now, perhaps in the moments it happened, Tom told himself that Vi's death wouldn't be his fault. He didn't push her after all, he simply didn't save her. But something, perhaps Vi's ghost, perhaps Tom's own subconscious, clearly disagrees. Tom finds himself plagued with strange phenomena. He finds Vi's body floating in the water, but then it dissolves into seaweed. Her watch washes up on the beach. Strange footprints appear in the sand. And ultimately, a seeming apparition of Vi confronts Tom, threatening that she will haunt him for the rest of his life. So, is Tom genuinely being haunted? Is he cracking up over the guilt of what he did? Or is there some other explanation for these apparently supernatural shenanigans? Well, that'd be spoilers, so I'm not going to say. In any case, in the latter half of the 50s and the first half of the 60s, Bert I. Gordon became known as a prolific producer of low budget science fiction and horror films, most of which he also wrote and directed. Gordon's main genre was giant sized people and creatures. His filmography includes The Amazing Colossal Man, War of the Colossal Beast, Village of the Giants, as well as other giant critter flicks like Earth vs. the Spider, Empire of the Ants, and Food of the Gods. Now, as you might surmise from the plot synopsis I just gave, though, Tormented lacks the forced perspective shenanigans that anchored so much of Gordon's other work. One thing it does share in common with any of those pictures, though, is that it was chosen to be the subject of an episode of Mystery Science Theater 3000. So it must be terrible, right? Because that's pretty much the only criteria a movie needs to be on that show. Well, as it happens, while Tormented is far from a flawless piece of filmmaking, it's actually got some positives to it, at least I think so. One thing that I liked about the movie is that it's not afraid to recognise that neither Tom nor Vi is wholly innocent nor wholly irredeemable. I mean, Tom's at best guilty of manslaughter. He deliberately chooses not to try and save Vi when he clearly has capacity to do so. And from the conversations, it seems clear that he's been leading Vi on in the past, presumably so he could sample her sultry charms while attempting to win over his clueless heiress fiancée. Now that he's succeeded in the latter chase, Tom doesn't need or want Vi in his life anymore. On the other hand, blackmail's not exactly a nice thing to do either. So much as I sympathise with Vi for the ways Tom's used her, the way she handles it is a bit sketchy. And let's face it, even with the best possible outcome, blackmailing a guy into dating you is not likely to result in a healthy relationship. Situating Tom and Vi as both villain and victim also creates mystery over what's happening. Are the weird events all a product of Tom's conscience? It's plausible. Did Vi survive or have an accomplice who is now tormenting Tom? Also possible. Was Vi actually besotted enough that her spirit truly is haunting Tom? Well, also possible if this is an actual supernatural movie. So, yeah, it's all a bit more nuanced than is normal for films of this kind, particularly in this budget range. And Tormented is, in fact, more ambitious than many films of its type. I've seen one reviewer describe it as Gordon's first attempt to make a really serious horror film for an adult audience. And I think that's a fair call. Certainly, I don't know if it's his first attempt, but certainly it is an attempt to make a really serious horror film. In addition to creating a more complex than usual moral element, Gordon has crafted some decently spooky moments and elicited solid performances from his cast. No one's going to win any acting awards, of course. This is still clearly a low budget piece of filmmaking, but there's none of the ham handed, stilted delivery that often plagues such fare. Unfortunately, there seem to have been some other ambitions at work as well. Although this film had a cinematic release, Gordon structured it to have a mini cliffhanger every 15 minutes or so. That's a format that suggests he had ambitions to get this movie onto television at some point, either after or instead of going to theatres. And the theory there is simple enough. You have to have a cliffhanger right before you go to commercials to make sure the audience comes back. But unfortunately, that requires a deft hand to smoothly build a story. You've got to build in those story beats. And you certainly need a more deft hand than Burt I. Gordon's. The result is that the film's pace and plotting feels quite lumpy, with events sometimes quite disjointed from one another. And there are certainly other weaknesses to the film. The ending is both overwrought and overdone, and yet also fundamentally undercooked. The true explanation of what's happening is frankly a bit straightforward and simple, and Gordon seems to have tried to compensate for this by going full ham on the melodrama. It's not impossible that a strategy like that could have worked, but it would have needed more skillful execution than what we see here. What was, I suspect, supposed to be a chilling moment instead came across to me as almost farcical. A factor in the finale not quite working is the film's special effects. Although Gordon was a trained visual effects person, he seems to have got into directing and producing so he could make the kind of movies he wanted to make. He never had much in the way of resources and tended to favour cheap techniques like forced perspective. Famously, this is a man who offered up live crickets crawling on a photo of a building as a climactic special effect. So yeah, Tormented is a better than average effort from Bird Eye Gordon, and I actually had a decent time watching it. But it's still got enough scripting and effects weaknesses to make it a candidate for the Mystery Science Theater 3000 guys. Next time, Chris Roberts' Wing Commander games were famously cinematic in scope, so much so that Wing Commander 3 was stuffed with video cutscenes featuring Mark Hamill as the main character. And in 1999, Roberts got the chance to try and transfer his franchise to the actual cinema. It did not go very well. But that is next time. Until then, thanks for watching. I hope you've enjoyed it. And if you've seen Tormented, let me know what you thought of it.